So I want to talk about if my tire is actually worth patching. Let's say you've got a great big bolt in it and you want to know, should I patch this or should I just replace this? So when it comes to replacement, we recommend replacement at 430 seconds, which 430 seconds on a gauge is really easy. Not everybody has a tire gauge. So if you're trying to figure that out on your own, if you use a penny and when you place Lincoln upside down against the tire, like this, if you can see the top of Lincoln's head, it's time for a tire. That's generally a good rule of thumb. We at the shop use a tire gauge because we get a good accurate reading as to what that measurement is, and it's consistent across the board. So that is how we measure the tire. But let's talk about tire patching, because there is some material that's actually removed when you do a tire patch. So I'm just going to walk you through how I patch a tire and why it can be dangerous if your tire is in need of replacement. So here's what we do. Okay.
Why does it matter if it's wet or dry inside?
You want it dry because we're going to use glue, and the patch itself has some sticky, but we're going to use some rubber cement, and if it's wet inside, it will not cure, and you're just going to have a leaking tire still. So we'll get it dried up. If you've got a great big hole in it, like let's say you've had a bolt come through your tire like so, we use what's called a plug patch. And for a plug patch, I have to make that hole slightly bigger for it to fit. So we're just going to find our hole. And just make it a little bit bigger. But this is where you have to ask yourself if it's worth getting a new tire or just patching my existing one, because this is where material gets removed. So you rough this area up. And really all you're trying to achieve here is a flat surface. There's ridges inside a tire and you kind of see there's like this textured stuff going on. You just want it flat. And so to get it flat, we use this little kind of sandpaper guide. And you have to be really careful, and I'll show you why. Because if you go too deep, you actually end up getting into the cords. And as soon as you get into the cords of the tire, there's a serious safety issue there. So let me show you what that looks like. So if you go too far for too long, you'll end up wearing right into the cords, and there's your cords right there. A lot of times people will drive their vehicle and they'll wear out their tire till they can see these cords on the outside. Once you see these cords, you've got about 1/4 of an inch left before there's no more space. It's just an open hole at that point. So when you're patching a tire, we have to be really careful that we're not removing a bunch of material. It's really easy to go too deep and to go too far. And at that point, it's time for a tire. You can't fix that. And I myself have had to purchase a tire because I went a little bit too far with my sandpaper, so to speak. So anyway, that's a good informational there, but back to our patch.
So Zach, if they have a hole in their tire and they say it's too close to the sidewall, what does that affect?
So your sidewall here, right? Like, so let's say we have a nail here. You would be putting a patch on a rolled edge, not a flat edge. And for example, my patch is flat. And so if I try and take this patch and roll it, it's not going to seal. You want it flat. So patching it on the sidewall, it usually doesn't work out. It won't seal. And it's actually unsafe. It's not a safe condition to patch anything on this. It's actually, you're better off just to get a new tire. Because like I said, up here you have all this tread, right? But between here and here, there's only about 1/4 inch of material, and that's not much. When they're manufactured this way, they're ready to go. This rubber is good and solid. There's actually steel cords that are running through this right here, but there's maybe a 1/16 of an inch of rubber before you see the cords here. So it's just not safe. We don't do it. You, the customer, can do it yourself. If you wanted to go buy a plug kit, which is one of these right here, you can do that yourself. But we as a shop, as a professional facility, we cannot do that. It's a safety issue. So yeah, fun facts. Back to this. So now that I've roughed up my bolt hole to get a good flat surface, now I want to clean it with this. This is a solvent, so it'll evaporate quickly. And all I'm doing right now is when you grind on that spot with that sandpaper, you get little, you can kind of see it right in here, but you get little debris from the removal of it. So you just want to get that good and clean. And that's what's nice about that cleaner, is it's kind of a solvent base, so it evaporates quickly so you have a good dry condition there. And then you want to take a little bit of fast drying cement. Just a nice thin film. And then I let that dry, and that takes 5-ish minutes to dry, so I'll just let that dry. So where we've roughed that spot up and we've removed that material, that's why when it comes to should I replace or should I patch, usually if the tire's in need of replacement, it's best to just replace it. Because as you can see, I've started to take away material. If there's not enough material up here, you're kind of playing with fire, so to speak. It's not necessarily that you can't do it. Like if you were in a pinch and you just needed to get back on the road and needed your tire patched, we can totally do that. But in the long run, you're better off just to replace that tire if it's time to be replaced. Anyway, so now that my cement's dry, I take this patch and I get it started through there. And then I'm gonna pull it all the way through. And I really like these plug patches because it's actually gonna go through and seal the hole itself. See that rubber come all the way through? Just like that. You take this is a stitcher. And what this is gonna do is this is gonna seat this patch into the tire. And this is why you can't do it on the sidewall, because you want a good flat surface. So you're gonna get a good rubber seal in it. The other reason it's difficult to patch a sidewall is because as your tire rolls down the road, it flexes. You're gonna push, as the weight of the vehicle rolls over it, it kind of flexes downward, and that stresses the sidewall. Another reason that you can't patch it, because if you're stressing that sidewall, it's just gonna cause that patch to separate, and then your patch is no longer patched. So just get this threaded in there, nice and flat. And then I'll remove the plastic piece sometimes. So it doesn't fight me. Yep. And then last but not least, we use inner liner sealer. And what this does is creates a nice airtight barrier between the patch and the tire itself. This helps prevent against future leaks or current leaks. And it doesn't take a lot. I'll just cover my area that I kind of sanded down on. And again, I'll let that sit for 5 to 10 minutes until it's good and dry, and then I'll mount the tire back onto the wheel and it'll be ready to see the road again. But that's the biggest reason between patching and replacing, is just material, is how much thickness you have left. And I would much rather feel safe about the tire that I'm driving on, because this is what contacts the road. This is what keeps me safe. And at that point, you're money and time ahead to just change the tire if it's needed. And then last but not least, we take care of this little guy so you don't have a weird extra friend hanging out on your tire and it looks like it never even happened. But if you have any questions about your tires, if you're even just concerned about your tires, haven't had them looked at in a while, feel free to give us a call, make an appointment. You can even swing by. Usually checking out a tire, I can do that right at my front door and give you an opinion that way. So.